The wind howled across the desolate plains, carrying the bitter bite of a coming storm. Lightning clawed across the dark sky, striking the edges of the horizon where the desert met the mountains. In a small wooden cabin, miles away from the nearest settlement, a young rancher named Cole Maddox sat by the fire, staring into the flames as thunder rolled like a growl of the earth itself. He had been out herding cattle when the rain began to fall, soaking him to the bone, and now he was trying to get warm again in his lonely cabin. But that night, fate had other plans. Cole had heard stories of the Apache tribes that lived beyond the ridges, tales whispered by travelers and traders, stories that mixed fear and respect. He had never seen one up close, though he had always been curious. As lightning flashed again, illuminating the window, he thought he saw a shadow move outside, quick, uncertain, and human. He stood up, hand on the rifle leaning by the door. "Who's there?" he called, voice low and steady. There was no answer, only the wind and the sound of rain hammering the wooden walls. Then, the door creaked open. A figure stepped in, drenched from head to toe, shivering violently. It was a woman, her dark hair plastered to her face, her eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. She looked no older than 20, dressed in torn buckskin and carrying the marks of someone who had been running for her life. Cole froze, unsure whether to reach for his weapon or offer help. The woman's voice was barely a whisper. "Please," she said, her accent soft but clear. "I need warmth, just for a while." Cole hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Close the door," he said quietly. "You'll freeze out there." She did, trembling as she moved toward the fire. He could see her hands shaking as she tried to remove the wet fabric from her arms. "Sit there," he said, tossing her a thick wool blanket. "You can dry off by the fire." The woman wrapped herself in it gratefully, sitting down near the flickering flames. Steam rose as the heat began to drive the rainwater from her clothes. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the crackling of the fire filled the room. Then Cole said softly, "You're Apache, aren't you?" She glanced up sharply, her expression cautious. "Yes," she said finally. "My name is Naya." Cole nodded. "I'm not gonna hurt you, Naya. But you shouldn't be out here in this weather. You could have died." She gave a faint smile. "I almost did. Soldiers came to our camp at dawn. They burned everything. I ran. I've been running ever since." Cole's jaw tightened. He had heard rumors of raids like that, cruel acts carried out under the flag of justice. He stared into the fire, anger flickering in his chest. "You can stay here until the storm passes," he said quietly. "You're safe tonight." Hours passed. The rain pounded against the roof, relentless. Cole dozed off in his bed, exhausted, while Naya sat awake by the fire, eyes full of memories she wished she could erase. The warmth began to fade as the fire died down, and the cold crept back into the small cabin. She looked toward the bed where the cowboy lay, shivering slightly even under his blanket. She hesitated, then made a choice that would change both their lives. Quietly, she stepped closer, clutching the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Cole stirred slightly as the floor creaked, but did not wake. Naya laid down beside him, trembling not from fear, but from the cold that had seeped deep into her bones. For a moment, neither moved. Then Cole opened his eyes. He turned, startled, to see her lying there, eyes closed, breathing softly. For a second, his heart stopped, not from fear, but from something deeper. She looked fragile, almost ghost-like in the dim light, and yet her presence filled the cabin with a strange peace. "You're cold," he murmured. "Could have just said so." She opened her eyes slowly and whispered, "I didn't want to wake you." He nodded, pulling the blanket up to cover them both. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside that cabin, something warmer began to grow, not romance, not yet, but understanding. Two souls from opposite worlds, both scarred by life, finding comfort in the smallest act of kindness. By dawn, the storm had passed. The land was fresh and alive, the sky painted with pink and gold. Cole awoke to find Naya sitting by the window, wrapped in his old coat, watching the sunrise. "Morning," he said softly. She turned and smiled, a smile faint, but real. "You saved my life," she said simply. Cole shook his head. "No. You saved yourself. I just gave you a place to rest." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not an enemy, but a man who had chosen compassion when others would have turned her away. "Maybe," she said, "the spirits brought me here." Cole chuckled. "If they did, I owe them a thank you." When she finally stood to leave, the air was still cool from the rain. She looked back once before disappearing into the hills, her figure fading like mist under the rising sun. Cole stood in the doorway, hat in hand, feeling something he couldn't name. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the beginning of a story the frontier would never forget. That night, as the sun dipped below the plains and the coyotes began to howl, Cole sat by the fire again, staring into the flames. The empty cabin felt less lonely somehow, as if a part of her still lingered in the air, a whisper on the wind. He smiled faintly and whispered to himself, "Be safe, Naya." And out there, beneath the wide western sky, she was, strong, free, and forever part of his story. If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing family of Western storytellers. More untold frontier stories are coming soon, tales of courage, love, and destiny in the wild American West. Don't forget to like, comment, and share to keep these legends alive.